wonderful experience at a museum, that's what we want to have happen. And so the more comfortable you are and the more comfortable you can make the visitor, they'll leave with a good experience. And if they're off Islanders, they'll remember us. If they're on, they'll be back. That's what this is all about. That's what we want to do. So my name is RaVae. That's one thing I forgot to do last night was introduce myself. And I prepared, along with Fritz, who was one of the two glass blowers we went to visit on Whidbey, this glossary. So if you will look at it, I'm not going to go over the whole thing. It would take us a couple of hours to really discuss it. But let us start with, in this room, we're going to talk about blowing glass, some of the terminology. You can have the list to take home and study it further, Google some of the words if you want to. It's not something that a visitor is going to ask you, but if you understand the process, you'll feel better about talking about the work. So that's why we're doing it this way. Fritz called me and I put my phone on speaker and I sat at the computer and he talked. And then I sent it back to him and he made some corrections with his pencil and we went over it again. We did this for 4 or 5 days until we came up with this document. Now, you'll notice he says at the top, with the tip of the blowpipe to the Toledo Museum of Art. That's because he started with their list, but he didn't like it. It wasn't to his liking, and he wanted to add some things, and he wanted to change the explanations a lot. So he's giving them credit, but he's retaining his authorship. So let's start with the blowing of glass. You know it's done with a blowpipe, and a blowpipe is a hollow tube. They come in many different diameters, depending on the size of the object you're going to blow. They're about 4 feet long, maybe a little longer, 5 feet. I'm going to refer to Karen here every once in a while because she worked at Pilchuck too. She worked in the flat glass area, but she was down there when Morris was there, and she has a good vocabulary. So anyway, we start with a blowpipe, and the gaffer, who is the main person blowing. Morris was the gaffer for Chibuli from about 1978 to about 90, when he split away and set up his own studio. So he was the main blower. As the main blower, he takes his blowpipe and he puts it in the oven. I mean in the furnace. And it has a large opening and a sliding glass or sliding door that slides over the hole to keep the heat in there. Because we've got glass melted, takes almost a week to melt the crucible of glass. It's a heavy bowl-like container that sits in the furnace, and he gathers the glass on the end of the blowpipe. Now here's where gather is both a noun and a verb. It's called a gather when it's on the end of the pipe. He is gathering it. So it's 2 uses of that term. So when he doesn't have the blowpipe in there, the oven door goes, or furnace door goes shut. It's heated at 1200 degrees to melt that glass, and that's how it's maintained. So you can understand why they'd have to keep the door closed. He takes the gather and the blowpipe to wherever his station is that he's working. A lot of times they're sitting, sometimes they're blowing, depends on what phase of the project they're in. They blow it, and then they put it back in the glory hole. This is another furnace without a door. If they're using a small piece, it's actually got a door, but it's got a door within a door within a door. So that if you're just drawing a small, blowing a small vessel, you would open only the little door. But if you're blowing a big vessel, you would open the largest door. Again, to keep the heat in there. That's what the whole purpose is. Sometimes it's necessary to gather again. And so the glass on the blowpipe is put back in here and gathered more. But it has to all be the same temperature. So there's a torch being used to heat the bubble on the blowpipe to have it, and how they know the temperature is beyond me. That's part of this, that's the art, not the science. They're just so intuitive that they can heat it with the torch, and then it goes back in the glory hole, in the furnace, gathers a little more, and then they can blow. Now, when you think, Eileen, what's the question?
So you've got the molten glass on the end of this logo, and he wants more, and so he puts it in there and gathers
some more.
and blows it and puts it back in and gathers more.
And sometimes that's how they change colors, because there's more than one furnace. I keep wanting to use the wrong term here, and I don't want to confuse you. This is the furnace, this is the glory hole. Okay. There is no crucible in here, there is no melted glass in here. This is only a hot oven. This has the crucible, which is what this little oval is supposed to represent, with the molten glass in it. Okay, sometimes you've seen check glass, particularly where there might be blue coating or red coating on the outside and then it's clear on the inside. That's a case of a double dipping. Okay? And then they've engraved through the first service into the second service. Okay, so now let's say you have to do a lot of picturing. Let's say you've got a blowpipe and you've got a bubble on the end. This is going to be the bottom of your vessel because it's closed, right? This is going to be the top because it's stuck on the end of the blowpipe. What happens next is this is incised. It isn't really cut, but it's pinched with something called, in your list, the jack. The jack is, they have tweezers, all different sizes. And by using those tweezers, here they can pinch, they can make a waist on it if they want to, with the tweezers. When this is being done, when they're using the tweezers all the way around the vessel, the blower, the gaffer, will sit in a chair like this that has steel arms right about this height, and they're long. He sits there and he lays the rod across the arms, and it gets rolled, and the person over here with the jack can pinch it or incise it at the point where the bubble joins the blowpipe. He can just mark it a little bit. Like before we cut a sheet of glass, we mark it and then we pop it. He does that and then he goes plunk and it falls off. That always amazes me. I always think it's going to break. They don't hit the glass, they hit the rod and it falls off. If this vessel's done, this bubble is done. You've seen some of those round balls that they use for Christmas decorations and stuff like that that hang in the windows. It might go right into the annealing oven, top of your list. This oven maintains a temperature. It actually doesn't maintain it, it decreases the temperature over a period of 24 hours. If the vessel were left out, it would crack. It would cool too quickly. So this controls the temperature reduction, and after a 24-hour period, the vessel can be taken out. Now let's say he's making a vase or a big bowl. Before he knocks it off of here, he comes with the next tool, which is a punty. A punty, that's on your sheet. He gathers a little bit and he puts it on here and he knocks that one off, and now it's connected to the punty. The punty is not hollow. It's a solid rod. You will note that when you see the pictures of all of the artists downstairs that they're all pretty beefy. They many times are carrying such heavy loads on the ends of these punties and blowpipes, up to 30 pounds to 40 pounds. We saw, remember that big one we saw at Fritz's? That big, and he said it was just about 40 pounds. Can't imagine. Imagine that on the end of a 4 to 5 foot blowpipe and you're manipulating it. You'd have to have shoulders and arms to support, and a back to support that. So now, the vessel's on the puntee, and at this point, a lot can happen. A tool can be brought in there and the opening opened up. It can be made quite large. Remember, it's hot, but it needs to go back into the glory hole to get hotter. Not into the furnace, goes in here just to get heated up, and then all kinds of things can happen. You can use a puffer, which is on your list, which is a tool that you can put inside the vessel and make a pouch if you want to push out from the inside. I'll explain that downstairs when we look at Ross Richmond's work. He's got a good example to show you about that process. When Chihuly blows one of his big ruffled balls, but this time this is cut off, and he's got it, they actually cut it with the scissors, cut the glass with the scissors, and then there's that scrap, whatever they throw away. So now, if he spins that, and if he spins it holding the rod this way, what's going to happen? It flares out, right? And if they swing it a certain way, it makes the ruffle go a certain way. So, and they know how to do that. It's becomes just instinctive. It's an intuitive process. If they want to add a colored ribbon around the end, somebody else gathers on another pipe a little bit, and the guy sitting here with in this chair with his bowl, now let's say we got a bowl here, he turns the piece slowly, and the other person adding, what do you call that trail? When they add another color on the edge. There's a term for that.
Filigree?
No, filigree is even more lattice,
Snail trail.
Snail trail. No, but I can't remember what it's called, but it's a thin line. It is a wrap. Yeah, that's right. Then they can add it, but remember now all the glass has to be the same temperature. So this has to go back in here, or that particular area, maybe not the whole bowl, that area has to be heated with a torch so that what comes out of the glory hole is the same temperature, or there isn't a fusion. Also, Fritz said to stress that when you're fusing handles on a piece, or downstairs, the head on some of those figures, anytime you're putting two pieces together, the chemical composition of the glass has to be identical. Or if it doesn't break in here, it'll break later. That's a very critical part of the process. Any questions so far?
Does color change the chemical property?
I don't think so, but that's a guess, Laura. I have to say I don't know for sure.
Yeah, it has to.
Well, color
We
would
did say
change it a
something
little.
about color last night.
We did talk about color, and
Yes, there is, I recall there is a difference.
It depends on what you're using as a pigment for your glass. Some of them are metals, some of them are just chemicals, some of them are organic.
Some are more refractory, some are
Yeah.
more melty, so it will
they-
change a little bit. Tiny amounts, I mean, we never go above 10% is really high, so.
But it's like welding, you could weld aluminum and steel together. Yeah, I mean, you have to use steel and steel, or aluminum to aluminum. That's the notion, and it's got to be very similar in nature. It's like-
Well, it's the expansion rates of the glass. Different colors expand at different rates, and it's called coefficient of expansion. And they're not the same, but if your base is the same expansion rate, then you're fine. But you've got to be really careful with the colors. Colors are interesting. Pink is gold. That's what they put in there, and you can see pink bowls there, and red, there are a lot of them. That's why they're more expensive than green or blue.
And that's true in any medium, that red is the most expensive because it's cadmium. But that's not about this. So let's look at methods of getting color or images into or onto the glass. When you watch the video, you saw that one portion where he's putting pine cones and pine needles in the glass. In the glass. He's laying cane, which would be the size of the pine needles. Cane is a long piece of glass, like a piece of spaghetti. They come in different sizes and every color of the rainbow. So if, for instance, when he was rolling the pine needles, I use that as an example because you saw it. He would lay the canes on the marver, which is something I just skipped. The marver is the stainless steel or steel table that the gaffer rolls, the bowl or vessel on the blowpipe. He's rolling it to make it smooth. Or if he wants it elongated, he shapes it on this table. When he's ready to put a design in the pot, he will lay, for instance, these canes, like pine needles, onto the table. The bubble comes out of the glory hole, nice and hot, comes back, he rolls it over the cane. It's all picked up because the glass is sticky, right? He keeps it there. He can, once it's on there now, he can blow again and expand the design. If it's the way he wants it as a final project, then he can take it back to the glory hole if he's using clear, or maybe, or not glory hole, the furnace, if he's using clear on top of the pine needles as a coating, gets it back in there, gets another coating, and can blow it again or whatever, or not. So that's what makes it look like the design is inside the glass. It really is inside the glass because there's many layers. It's a kind of a fusion process. I lost my thought. I was going to take you. Oh, I know, canes. You have seen some glass, I'm sure, that has circles, either like little Cheerios that in fact downstairs I think we have an example of a circle with a different color in the middle. Other times you've seen them look like grandma's, those crocheted quilts where there's like a daisy pattern, red, yellow, green, blue, and then there's something else in the middle. Take a bundle of canes, think of a bundle of spaghetti, and you cut it off. You cut it, cut it. Now you lay them on the marver and you roll them up onto the ball of glass. Then if you blow it, you expand that design.
Are the canes hot?
Not when they're on the marver. No, they're cold. It's all cold there.
But it could.
But it sticks to it because for one thing, it's very small. And then it's reheated before you actually blow it. You couldn't just blow it without reheating. So it'd be heated with a torch.
Do they make their own canes? So they get the specific colors that they want?
I think it's always bought. I doubt that anybody bothers to make them. Why would you if you can buy
There are
them?
glass companies that make them now, but you used to make them yourself.
So, let's see, what else do we need to talk about here? Paddles are wooden paddles that look like a small pizza thing that goes in the oven, right? So these can be used while the person, we might flatten the bottom of a vessel that's a bubble, and we're just trying to make it flat so that you got a bottom in the end and it will stand up. You might want to shape it on one side, make one side flatter. They also, I don't know how they do this, but they are able to make the walls thick in some places and thin in others in this whole blowing process. And why would you want to do that? When we look downstairs at Richmond's figures, if he wants a shoulder or an arm to stick out, you will see the bubble he blew, the cylinder he ended up with, but now there's a shoulder. he had to have more glass there so that he could afford to push it out. And he went in with the puffer and pushed it out from the inside because there was enough glass. That's another one of those beautiful mysteries about this medium that makes it so fun to watch.
What temperature do they carve? Is it cold? Is the glass cold as they carve into the
Yes.
glass?
Yes, it's cold. In fact, Fritz's shop, remember, it was called Cold Shop.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that process is an engraving process that can be done either by hand with an engraving tool, or it can be cut with the circular diamond disc, which he demonstrated for us. Ross Richmond, not Ross, excuse me, Shelley Wazalowski's husband, Rick Allen, did most of the carving, engraving for Morris for years. So what we've got here, we've got a lot of glass artists because Shelley's husband is a renowned blower. Raven's wife, Kelly Odell, is also a very big name in the Northwest. Ross's wife isn't a blower, but she did all the fiber work that's on all of Morris's work. She's the only person that's ever done that. So this is a pretty tight group. And this is only 3 of the team that he has had together. This is part of his genius, I think, in that he's so technically astute, so accomplished, that what he does with glass is almost without thought. It comes naturally, like breathing. He was a ceramicist. He got his degree at Ellensburg, along with Johnny, who we saw in the video. Johnny has stayed with him his whole life in the glass world. His life is long, but he was his assistant who worked with him the whole time, creating all of the mounts. So everything you see downstairs, Johnny created, and he came here and installed the show. So he's been a very loyal friend, and his work building the mounts is also extraordinary. If you look carefully how each one is designed specifically for that piece of glass. He doesn't just make 1 or 2 and then crank them out. Each one is for each piece.
So you're talking about what attaches things to the wall and the stands?
Yeah, the steel, all the steel work. Anyway, what I was talking about his skill and his genius is that he draws to him a staff. I don't even want to use the word staff. He draws artists to him who are so skilled that they can dance together. It is not a teacher-student relationship. These people are not students when they come. They're already good. They make music together. It's like doing a symphony, conducting a symphony with all wonderful musicians. Another way to get color on is you, besides canes, which you would have a pattern. If you just want a coloration, and you'll see a lot of that downstairs. Frit is a very fine version of broken glass. It's like sand. It can be very fine. I don't think as fine as flour, but like sugar. Or it can be coarser like sand. The frit is sprinkled on the marble in the design that the blower wants to use. You might blend several colors. The hot bubble is rolled across the frit. It's picked up on the bubble, is heated with a torch, blown or put in the glory hole and blown, and then you get the blending of colors that almost looks painterly. We'll talk about that downstairs too. Any question come to mind that something I haven't explained?
I've seen some shards that are rather large pieces used also.
A shard is a different thing. And that's defined on your piece here too. And shards can be, that's, a shard, a piece of ceramics, well, a shard of glass. There can be lots of pieces put down, and it's picked up the same way and blown, heated and blown. And you can put more glass on top of it, do another gather, so that you can bury them deeply into the glass in the vessel. Anything else?
Are all of Morris's works blown? Does he use these
Absolutely.
other techniques, any of the?
They're all blown, but here's a good connection for you to make. If he started out as a ceramicist, he was working with clay with his hands, right? He was building forms. He went to Seattle from Ellensburg, went to work for Morris as a truck driver, eventually asked if he could work in the shop. So he's bringing with him his history. So while he blew Chihuly's bowls for 10 years, he didn't lose that sense of ceramics. And actually, when you look at the urns and some of the other pieces, don't you think, this doesn't look like glass, this looks like clay. Well, it's because that's where his vocabulary was. That's where his head was. And so there's another term you can add to your glossary, which isn't on there. I sent an email to Fritz and he did not respond, and I'm not sure why he didn't want me to include this word. But it's scavo, S-C-A-V-O. Scavo is a process of aging the glass, making it look older. And it's using a chemical that actually eats into the glass. And I'll point you, no, it's not acid. I'll point some out to you in the North Gallery. All of these artists use scavo in one way or another, or they etch it with a wash of hydrofluoric acid, or they sandblast it, or sometimes they acid etch and sandblast, and then cover it with a luster. I'll point these different things out to you when we go downstairs. But all of it is following Morris's thinking, which undoubtedly they've adopted, about form. Morris makes an interesting form, a beautiful form that is quietly beautiful. It is not shiny. It's not reflective. If it was reflective, we would lose the form. Think about a shiny vessel, your glasses, a shiny floor. Can you see the color in the floor when it's really shiny? You can't. So the softer surface allows the form to be defined and the color to come through. So that's why he uses all these other methods to take away the shiny. Now, from 1980 to 90, his vessels were all shiny. When you Google him, you look at a lot of different sites, you will see a lot of shiny vessels, but they're not going to be Chihuly-esque. They're going to be closed and flat and multicolored. Some of them having metallics in them, and they're quite lovely, but they're totally different than this. Once he broke away and formed his own studio, we have 2 shiny pieces in this show, and that's all, and they'll be easy for you to pick up, but they're not Chihuly-esque at all. They're clearly Morris, they're just, he hasn't used any of these other processes to change the finish on them.
What would be the best way to contrast Morris to Chihuly? How would you, other than the brightness, is it the vessels versus the abstractness, or what? How it's?
Well, I think if you've seen a couple, I'm not going to say one Chihuly, but if you've seen a couple of different shapes that he blows, you've seen what he does. It is a form of glass work that is, in my opinion, is closer to a craft than it is fine art. When we think about what Morris does, the genius of this man is that he has taken in his environment and absorbed it, and he knows his business so well that he doesn't have to think about the process. He just goes inward, and what is produced is something that comes from his unconscious. That's why it's art. He gets in the zone when he's working, and when you're in the zone, you don't know the difference between yourself and the art. You become the art. And when that communion happens, art happens. And that's what happens with Morris. He creates. Now what, do you know, how would you define create?
Something unique.
Something unique. To create something is to put elements, whether it's material things or design, elements together that have never been together before, or that you know of. Otherwise, it's an emulation, it's a copy, it's a reproduction. But if it's a creation, it hasn't existed before. So when he's in the zone, he's working with his subconscious, his unconscious, to produce forms. When we go downstairs and look at the big panels that have lots of small artifacts on them, you're going to want to say, now what is this? Or a visitor is going to ask you, what is this supposed to be? What's that? We don't know. They were forms that he was inspired to create, perhaps because he did a lot of diving, still does a lot of diving, and maybe they look like some shape of shell or rock or something that he saw under the water. Or maybe he saw it when he's climbing. We have to remember that this exhibit is not literal interpretations of anything particular. They all come out of his consciousness. And they're stories, but you get to make up the story. He doesn't spell it out for us. The artists in the North Gallery are more literal. I would say, and this is because they're young. Morris isn't very old, but he's more mature as an artist. I'm not talking about glassblower even now. I'm saying as an artist, because he knows how to enter the zone and how to interpret. And the artists here in the North Gallery are doing astounding glasswork. Their imagery, you will experience, does not have the same depth. When you stand before a Morris, you can think about primitive times, consciousness, about human nature. Where's that line between animal and human, our development, thought? That's the kind of thing that will grab you in a Morris exhibition. Why don't we go downstairs and try it out? Do you have a...
Yeah, I did look up SCABO. So it's rolled in a mixture of potassium nitrate and calcium carbonate, which is whiting. So it's basically two chemicals that just dull the surface.
It actually eats that, and it keeps on eating as long as it's on there. We'll point some SCABO out to you that they choose not to remove. Thank you for that. I would expect that he would when he starts out.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, memorize.
Okay. I'm going to do it because I want to check myself. Oh, Pat.
Patricia.
Patricia. Sorry.
That's okay. I won't answer if it's Pat.
Sally. Sharon. Lit.
Cat.
Cat Rose. Thank you, Cat. Laura. Jack. Mary. Samantha. Linda. Elaine in the front. Judy. Anne.
Yeah, that's impressive.
You know this guy here?
Oh, and Gerard. Fritz's suggestion, he said we probably would be able to work more, but I found him to use work on Amazon. And he thinks this is the best, sweetest history of glass. I'm going to leave it at the desk for the duration of the exhibit. So that you can, when it's sleeping time around here, there's nobody in, you'll be able to learn some more. I also called Corning at his suggestion, and they are sending us 2 books free for every donation to the books. So I'll leave all of that at the desk. Let me tell you also that as I learn new things, anything that either contradicts or confuses what I do, not ever. A comfortable closeness is no closer than this. Okay, nobody's up in here. And but they can get closer than this if they want
You're
to.
not gonna put tape around these?
We have had this,
Discussion.
I don't know, Mary. Just ask me at 11 o'clock, and then ask me at 2. No, it keeps changing. It just keeps changing. So, here's an example of Scavo. It's on the top of his head. All of this work with the figure, starting with this piece back here, let me get away just so you people can see. Starting with this figure to all of those are done by Ross Richmond. And Ross worked at his studio, at Morris's studio, for 10 years. He got his bachelor's at the Cleveland Institute of Art.
How do they get such detail? The eyes.
Actually, here's a good example of using the puffer. This would be one bowl, when I say bowl, I mean bubble,
Okay,
no head, a bubble,
okay.
pinched off with the jack, then using the puffer on the inside to push out the knees and the shoulders. But it's all very flexible, fluid, hot glass, and it has to go back in to the glory hole many times while he's doing that because he has to keep it at just the right temperature to be able to do that.
And gravity starts pulling it down, so they have to
Sure.
stop it and get it back in there.
No, but the ears and the eyes.
Well, the head is done separately.
Okay.
It's on a little blowpipe, and he's using jacks and other kinds of tools to push in and pull out. He can take that nose and on a hot bubble of glass and just pull it right out. And then you can shape it. Just think, ceramicist, what would a person in clay do? He's able to do it with glass.
Do they ever use a mold like they do with glasses?
These guys don't, but you can, that's in your glossary also. A mold for glass blowers looks like a jelly mold, only it's very thick metal, and they blow the bubble, and then they stick it down in the mold.
But they don't use a mold for a face, in other words.
He doesn't.
Okay.
RaVae, was he a clay artist as well?
I don't know. I
I
don't know. I know he has a BA, and Shelley has a BFA. I don't know what his discipline was, but we should ask him.
Because I mean, I'm just looking at.
We should ask him because he'll be here for the opening. This blue figure over here is an example of having been acid washed and then the luster put on it. And it's just a finish.
It's nice.
Now, here's an example of, I think this is such a cool example. Here's the bubble. It's blown and stretched long, and it's before it's swung on the pipe, the frit is laid on the marver, okay, in the little sprinkles like colored sugar. The bubble is rolled on it, then it's tipped up like this, and it's swung. Can you not see that? So that's how you get the blending in the color. Then the head is added later. Now behind Mary Bacon over here is what we call, excuse me, Netski, small sculpture. Americans say Netsuki, but it's Netski. Small sculpture, and this is a lot of scavo. You see it all, it looks like we need to clean this pot, but it's still doing its work. Now Shelley Musilowski lives in Cedar-Woolley with her husband Rick Allen, who's the guy who did so much engraving. He's a blower also. And his particular images are spaceships, quite unlike what these people are doing. And Ross lives in Stanwood, at where the Morris studio is. And Raven, who did these other pieces on this other wall, is from Lopez.
How do you say her name again?
Musilowski.
Oh, okay. I thought you said there was some other word you said that was pronounced differently than it was.
Might not have been the person's name,
No.
however, you've got to say that's a mouthful. Musilowski.
That's beautiful.
Now, that's a good example of cane work. And notice the little dots on, the circles on the back of this animal. That would be cane, laid out like little circles, Cheerios, rolled on, and then when you blow it, it expands, and in the heat, it blends with everything else. Doesn't stay crisply defined.
See, those legs look, they don't look quite like a part of it.
They're attached, aren't they?
Yes.
You can see.
Yes.
Yeah. Those are done separately and then attached, and
Maybe next year.
maybe next year the seam will be better. You're right. You're right. And the same, you'll find places like that on this beautiful piece over on the wall also. The horns are done separately and attached.
The legs.
Yeah, you can see where the seams are. I think what's, excuse me?
I said beautiful still.
The green, the mother, the big whale on the end, that's the one that here is worth $22,000. It looks like it was spray painted, airbrushed. Not at all. It's all done with frit on the Marver, and he knows what he's doing to get the color blended as he blows. I think that's just phenomenal. And the same is true with the Norwal over here. This one, we want to caution you. Our staff moved the cube to the pedestal a little bit this morning, and that is helping. He placed it with this coming right out. It makes a big impact, but it could poke somebody's eye. So even if we put tape on the floor, what the heck? Somebody could still walk into it. So we're turning it. Now, you want to, if you've got people in here, you want to pay attention to that particularly. I don't think anything else is at risk.
These look like metal. I want to touch them.
Yeah, and that's what everybody, you're
But imagine how much installation has to do with the effectiveness, the story. One of the solutions suggested was turning the wheel that way. That wouldn't have the same effect. The pointiness of that is profound when you could be the victim. If it was pointing at the next wall, that's interesting, but it isn't nearly as good as coming this way.
What is offhand? It says offhand.
Yes, offhand just means straight blowing without a mold. It just means freehand. Like saying freehand drawing, or drawing. Yeah. It's just the term he likes to use. Anything else?
Will these three artists also be here at the opening?
Yes. Raven is teaching at Corning this week, so he's not going to be here, but his wife Kelly and family from Lopez will be here. Rick and Shelley will be here, and Ross and his wife will be here.
I think you know what
We
time
don't
they're
have any
coming?
material on them, can you buy them?
Probably by noon.
On the back of that.
Oh, on the back of
Yeah.
it,
What
okay.
time is it?
And
What's the
I
space signing
made
books?
an
Well, starting with the
exhibition and
donor group at
credential
noon,
sheets for them that
members
we're going to
to-
add to the
and
notebook.
then the
So
opening
you will
ceremony
have
started
that
at 3:30 and ribbon
There's
cutting
a lot.
at 4.
Does Johnny do the basis for these folks also, or is he doing somebody else?
There were 12, I think.
No, they make their own bases, I believe, because Shelley was working on hers last project. Raven worked with Morris, 6 years. He started blowing at the age of 16 with Lark Dalton over on Lopez. Did not go to the university. But that's saying quite a lot, isn't it? His work is extraordinary. Shelley spent, RaVae spent 7 years, Shelley spent 6 years with Morris, and she got her BFA in painting and intaglio printmaking from Emily Carr. So that's an important thing to note, because look how painterly these figures are. It's a different use of color. So her background as a painter comes into the production of her work the way Morris's background in ceramics comes into his.
And Ross?
Someone else asked me what his BA was in. I don't know what his. It looks kind of clay-like, doesn't it? Not
Definitely-
just the surface,
definitely sculptural,
but
yeah.
the shapes.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Maybe it was just sculpture. We can ask him. We should. And if anybody does ask him and you get little notes, we're going to have this notebook at the desk. So if you, Sharon, learn something that would help us all, you make a note. Not just from the artist, but from the visitor.
Some people might, yeah, they would have some history of their own.
Yeah. Okay, let's go into the other room. We can't say, what is it? What did he intend it to represent? If he's working in what I keep referring to as the zone, he probably has a gather, and he uses the jack and he pulls a little part out here and pushes a little part out there and pokes a little hole here. So now where am I going to go with this? And so it's just an intuitive creation. But
It's like he's just playing.
Like
in a way. I've asked that row of hooks there, I said, do you suppose those are shower hooks? Do you suppose they're fish hooks that attach to a spear somehow? You know, who knows? They don't, there's a story here, but you have to intuit the story. It isn't literal. And there's the best and deepest form of communication is through story and your intuition.
The lighting here really helps that exhibit too. That's
Well,
very,
yes.
that's really.
And where it's good, it's
shadows.
really good, and where it's not, it's not.
Okay, but
We're doing the best we
This is one of the
can.
winners here.
We're gonna get more cans, we just
Shadows
don't
are
have all the
great.
light.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I saw the Morris exhibit at the Glass Museum in Tacoma back 20 years ago, and he had a wall that was as long as this whole room, filled with these artifacts.
Johnny put that together,
Yeah.
and there were
It was
There were
beautiful.
500
Yeah, it
pieces
was
on
beautiful.
that wall.
I looked at that for
40
hours.
feet long.
Yeah.
He also put one together that went up 3 stories
Oh,
for
wow.
one of the museums in the East.
He said he never wanted to do that again.
Yeah, so it was horrible. Now, these are the funerary urns. The big one in the corner is the 911 urn. He did these in 2001, 2002. If you look on the back side of the big urn, you'll see that it says September 11th. When Johnny placed it, I said, Johnny, it's backwards. We can't see that that's, and he said, I don't like that side. I like this side, and this is where it is. And he made it. Why would you argue with the man who's worked with him all his life? You wouldn't.
Is this the man that was on the video that's sent out?
And he's the one who went to school with
Yes.
North.
Yes.
Can we ask, as people ask about it, can we allow them to stand behind?
Sure, well, sure, you just, they can't touch the pedestal, but they can go here, and if I'm right here,
Yeah.
I can see the whole thing.
Yeah. Is there going to be a sign or label for that?
Isn't there one? There isn't one. Thank you.
Good question.
I didn't know that, we'll have to find, there's no label. We don't have the 911 label on the wall here, because we didn't know about the lighting. I remember delaying that for that reason, and then I totally forgot it. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Anytime there's.
Who did you say did all of this work?
Someone in the movie
Mrs.
they
Ross
talked about it.
Richmond's wife. And I thought her name was something like Germaine, but honestly, I shouldn't be quoted on that. Okay, so
Some
these
beautiful
are
work
the
too, all
urns,
that nodding.
And they are considered among the best of all of his work. Reviewers a really great author. Here's a piece from the Mazorca period that we learned about in the film, and here's an example. If you were to touch this, I think you would see that there must have been something laid on the marver that blocked out the frit in all these light places. So that when he rolled it on the marver, it picked up in between. So it's kind of like stenciling.
Is there a dimension to it?
Yes. Yeah. Probably not. No, they don't describe. You have to dig that out of other places. Okay, so I'm going to bounce over here and just reflect on this to help you put it in a timeline. Karen shared with me this morning that he didn't start in the 80s. He started as the gaffer in 78 for Chihuly. The 80s and 90s, he made shiny glass. When he set up his own studio, it changed into, first of all, the smaller artifacts. At this period of time, when he's in between here, he's the resident artist at Hilchuk. In 91, he becomes the artistic director. In 92, he's on the board of directors at Hilchuk. So in 90, he sets up his own studio, starts with the artifacts. And as you look at literature on Morris, and you look at the canopic jars, they were done about, this is in sequence, in about 95. They come out of his interest in the canopic jars that come out of Iran, like 3000 BC, and they were funerary jars where they put the visceral internal organs of people, and the lids are almost always horned animals, deer heads, ram heads, things like that. You're offering me a good opportunity here right now to see. You are not too close, but we noted last night that one of our docents, when I was talking here, was standing right here, listening. This is too close. When this happens to you, you need to come up to the visitor and say, "Excuse me, would you step away, please?" Because this, I can't remember exactly, it's probably, it might be an $80,000 piece. You wouldn't want anything to happen.
The sign for this one causes one to go behind, very close to it.
I think we need the tape.
No, we don't put it on the pedestal. So
Yeah.
Olivia.
And it's in the light.
Question for the group.
Richard has a question.
How do you feel right now? How do you feel being in the proxemics where you stand to an individual piece? Do you feel comfortable? Can you sense that distance while you're moving around? Because you may have to do that with others.
I think backing up is the thing that worries me the most. And curses. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm nervous being around it.
But they're not allowed to. They have to check the.
Yeah, but if you have a purse, like this one has a backpack, I mean, it's like this,
No.
is this okay?
We
There's
don't
a
have
person
the
here
chance to check.
swinging around.
You have to ask them to leave it in their car or something.
I just say that because I'm listening to myself as I'm moving around, and the visuals and everything is blocking off my proxemics. I don't feel myself being as close to things. I'm too involved watching other stuff. And it's so easy, I feel like it's so easy to get sucked in and I forget where I'm standing. And I think people will do that.
I think that's true, and it's also an illustration of why, when you're looking up here, you could back into something else. Why is tape going to help?
Maybe as they come into the
Especially if it's not
room,
going to be white
we
tape,
talked a
if
little
it's going to
bit
be tape that goes with the floor.
What about if the volunteers that are
It's
at
like
the
a
desk,
candy jar,
when
isn't
they say, you
So
know,
I think we
please
need to-
silence your cell phones and, keep track of your children, say be mindful of your personal space or the space around the artwork. It's very fragile. As part of the open, we're so glad you're here. Please be aware, it's all very fragile stuff.
That's a good idea.
I have a delicate question, I guess. One time I was in I'm a potter myself, so I'm very interested in the technique and the details of things. And I'm very knowledgeable that I'm not allowed to touch the artwork in a museum. But one time I was in a museum and just like we were doing, like, what is that? And we were pointing and, you know, never intending to touch it, but trying to see, what is that right there? I really like that little part right there. But I was up like this and a docent came up and, you know, basically told me like, there's no touching allowed or something like that. And it really kind of ruined my experience for the rest of the show because it's like, you know, I was never going to touch that, but I was pointing. So what are some examples of how you could like remind people without making them wrong, especially before that, you know, if someone touched something, that would be a different story, but you're pointing and you're trying to talk, you want to kind of point.
And stop pointing.
It turns right off.
Yeah, it really offended me, I mean, because I wasn't intending, but if you're trying to point, you got to point. Yeah.
How about-
I wasn't even touching.
So what are a few phrases we can use?
How about,
Oh, you might be getting a little too close.
but you know,
Do you have any idea the value of that? I wouldn't want you to have to buy it.
you could also say,
That warning.
Karen has a comment.
you could also say, respect the personal space as you would for some person. You don't get up too close to them. Just say, each work has a personal space and don't get any closer to them than you would to a person you're talking to.
Well, my observation here is that there's only what, 14 of us? Yeah. And there's going to be 46 in here? So
That's why it's gonna take two of you in this room. And also because this wall.
Well, you said one person has to stand at the door, so there's only one person in this
No,
room.
there'll be two persons in this room.
And one at the door, that's three then for this room.
You need more.
They're only
Opening,
four on
there'll be
shift.
lots of-
Okay.
They got counters, yeah, controlling the
Okay.
ins and outs.
Okay.
Yeah.
The first couple of days.
I-
Many of us on the floor
I'm not sure I want to be
and
here.
after that, we're gonna watch it.
And I think docents too, when we size up the numbers in the room and you see who's here, we'll probably find the good places to stay where we can see it, because crowds may be here and there may be nobody over there. Consequently, you know, you'll shift around a little bit, it'll move.
And I'm sure there'll be some profiling, which where that's not kind of a bad word these days, but if someone comes in with little children, we will be kind of paying attention to them a little bit more than the elderly couple that looks like they know what to do. You know, it's like, we will be kind of watching more, I guess, but.
I can see little kids.
Yeah,
we need
right.
I was gonna comment there before I came up here, so I didn't
Sorry.
forget. Johnny told me that they did some deep diving in the Caribbean somewhere, and there was so much calcium in the water that the shells were this thick. That size, this thick. And it just stuck with him in his memory, and he came back and created this collection.
Keep forgetting this.
They were packed individually, and they just, Johnny just put them in that arrangement. They're not fastened down. So that's another thing we wouldn't want somebody to walk off with. They had to take all the silicone off that's the last place showed and glued them all down. So maybe there's been some theft, as the other place wasn't aware.
if anything could use a case, that could, you know.
That's a good idea.
That's true. So let's go here. When you read about him, the next 5 years, he's doing the Britons. And those are mostly bull-like or horned animal-like vessels that he distorts. He gives them nice, big, fat, luscious bodies and attenuated legs. Usually have horns. They are derived from Greek and Roman drinking vessels. So some of them look like a cup that you can pour your wine in, and you drink out of the bottom, or you may drink out of the top. We don't have a Raiton, but you will see them in the books of Morse's work and when you look online. The crows, the heads adorned, and Idolo were the next to be created. Idolo is the green man, and this lovely piece over here. I want each of you to take a turn sometime today or tomorrow or whenever, and stand back here And look how when you look through the amber, you can see the glow, and you can look into his mouth, and you'll see there's clear glass in front, and then you can see the design in the back of his head. If we had the right light to put something back here, that's the ideal way to show it, but we don't have that ability.
I was just gonna tell you, you're just a little bit too close to.
Oh, thank you.
Great, you bought it.
Taking too much license. Okay, then, after the green man and that figure, and we also have, according to Johnny, some idolitos. What would an idolito be?
Little ones.
Sure, on the panels, okay? Then the urns and the bird masks, which are over in the far corner. Then the pins. Now these look more like daggers, and there's quite a few on the panel out there in the atrium. Then the corn. Remember, mazorca is the farmer's name for corn. And then the medicine jars. And these, Johnny told me, were mainly derived from diving experiences in different oceans in the world and finding containers. Now, these are medicine jars. That's a medicine jar over there. And this one is over here. Doesn't mean that he saw a medicine jar that looked like this. He just made a container and made the form and the embellishment in a unconscious manner. Okay? Then this one over here is a fish trap. And the bowl beside it is a fish trap. It's one of the two shiny pieces. Clearly not a Chihuly-esque design, right? Up here, I suspect that the bubble was blown and the fish design was on the marver, and he rolled the bubble on the design, and then he added the netting afterwards in the wrap, with the wrap, okay? So after he does the fish traps and the drums, which are two of them over on that side, then the wall panels were assembled. But remember, he's probably been accumulating this stuff all along here and probably did a lot of it right there. So these were put together after he retired. And then in 2013, the big bowl in the atrium was released. So you get kind of a sense of the order of things. If you'd like to walk around, this is a mazorca bowl. We put a couple pieces on mirrors so that the underside can be appreciated without visitors standing on their heads.
Did anybody keep track of that, like, that, just say he worked 6 hours a day, it took 2 weeks to make that, or 20 minutes, or?
No, but this man is so prolific, and his blowing years, 25 years of blowing, thousands of pieces. Most of these smaller things happen pretty quickly, I think. And I would suspect that, like, each of the bats are done on separate bubbles, but the leaf itself probably took a couple hours. It depends on how much trouble they had, how many times in and out. And again, the coloration is done with frit. It looks like it was painted almost. Okay, let's go to the atrium, and we'll finish by going out the door this way. We used to fasten clothing together, hairpins, in a lot of different cultures. The beaded figure over here on the left is part of the Mazorca series. Then over here we've got a fish trap and a medicine jar. All the medicine jars have stoppers. Their identification labels are on the left end of this wall. The right side of this wall covers these three. So we've got another medicine jar gravel. And lots of flies. It's like, that medicine jar has some of the soil. That's from, it is. It's got the corn stalker in it. I saw several different ones when I looked at auction houses. There are other ones very similar that don't have the little white curls, that they almost look like worms, don't they?
They do.
Maybe they are, but that's from the Mazorca series.
Yeah.
So did the person who did the therapist?
I would believe that. Probably Ross's way.
Yeah, when you look at that jar, it's a grasshopper on the bottom, so it must be the.
It also looks like the Venus of Willendorf.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, but from the side you can tell that it's a grasshopper then.
And this is the big bowl from that they released in 2013. Can you imagine having that on the end of a blow pipe? Oh my God.
Exactly.
Oh my. And artifacts, you know, it's not up to you to describe what this means, what it is. We don't know that. And he doesn't want to share that.
What does it elicit in you?
That's right. He probably doesn't have an answer. He just made the form. And it's pleasing. Here's another medicine jar with bats. Or a bat.
Become familiar with it if you work here. Because it's going to be a long time.
Very solid visual picture to back up.
It is, it's a little bit close perhaps, we talked about that. And in this room, we don't think it's a problem because this is so filled with light.
Right.
And the floor is light,
No need.
it works here, but it doesn't work here. No, we'll come around to the mask and you'll see where we got it. This is a fish trap, another fish trap design, and the labels for these pieces are on the end of here. Another medicine jar. Fish trap.
I love this one.
Well, the thing would be right there, right there.
In back of Karen.
What does it say?
Oh,
okay.
What does it say this green one is?
Medicine jar with frogs. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The heads adorned, and the spears. Now notice that the spears are stacked on a rubber mat. We don't want kids or people to get too close because they're not glued to the wall or anything. But the mat, Johnny placed it and I offered to put a little fence around it and he said, no, let's just do it like that. They don't usually even use a mat, but we didn't feel comfortable.
Are those all glass, the whole thing?
Yeah. Solid glass. The same, there's another spear, if you notice, in this wall piece, which is a kind of turtle shell with the spear behind it.
Right, yeah.
Okay, questions? Now we've got two drums.
RaVae, what was the significance of the animal on top of the medicine jars? Like I noticed a bat
Stoppers?
on one. Yeah.
There's a
bat.
stopper with an animal on each one.
Right.
He doesn't talk about that.
Oh,
Maybe if you get a chance, you can ask him. And if somebody asks him and you get an answer, put it in the book. So we all know that. We're just told that he's not telling a literal story. So we want to try to get away from that and get more into the feeling of the piece of art than the literalness. There's two drums here. We looked at this pretty carefully last night and figured that there was a blowpipe and it was opened at the end and the lid was put on the end. Probably put together like that. And these are each blown separately and these, and then they're attached. There's two more medicine jars. That's pretty good. That's not always all the way back to the wall. It looks less here.
I like it.
Okay.
It's actually Dr. Peter, and we would like to do this.
Yeah, I think that's good.
And
Yeah.
It works and it gives you a boundary.
Yeah.
It's not,
Okay,
it's a
if
good
something
reminder.
gets too close, you can say, these are the lines.
Good deal.
Okay? Yeah? All right, we'll do it.
Got me.
Good job.
Okay, these are both medicine jars. And these are the bird masks. Does it make you wonder what culture they come from?
I see. Native art.
And this is a fish trap. We talked about that last night too, in that the stenciling with the frit coloration was all on the marver first, and the bubble was rolled on the marver, and then the wrap was added after that. And note, here's a good example. There are several of these, including the drums. Look at this beautiful little mounting. Is done so carefully. And when you take the piece off, it doesn't necessarily hold this scalloped shape. It's a springy device so that when they put it on it, it just gives and it cradles it. It's a beautiful way to suspend it safely.
So you said this is essential?
I would, we talked about last night how one would probably do that. And if you think about, if this stencil, if this was laid in there, it's, what?
I just said, if, like, you're pointing stuff, you're explaining.
I'm
I said
not
if-
touching it.
I know,
I'm
I said,
teaching you.
I know, I said if somebody, a visitor, was pointing that close and talking to their friend
You
about it,
would
would you
watch it.
say something about it?
I would watch them.
Okay,
I would watch them.
Just trying to get what-
If they got up to here, I
yeah.
would stop it.
okay.
But if they're in here,
Yeah,
I would not
okay.
stop it. I wouldn't encourage it.
Okay, I'm just
Yeah,
trying to.
yeah.
Depends on the people
It's hard.
too. You
Yeah,
know,
it does.
You pick
Yeah.
up on if they're respectful.
If they're
Yeah,
careful,
yeah.
that's right.
Because you do want to point to little areas and, you know, talk about it.
Now, RaVae, what about I volunteer in the schools? They're curious. This is very delicate to bring school children in. Are we?
You need plenty of parents. You need, I don't know what they've set up. The docents have a program for how they're going to do tours, but they'll want enough parents to keep kids' hands in their pockets, which is impossible.
Yeah.
And
And
not
smaller
fun.
groups.
And not fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think everybody, just from this walk around, is becoming sensitive enough, because I think I'm gauging myself where I'm at right now. And if you trust your gut, if you feel like they're too close, err into that side and say, please back up a little bit.
Yeah.
It's always worth doing that than having somebody knock something over. And
And
then we
also
go.
going into the schools, I am a teacher, but doing all that prep work, showing them the video, explaining a little bit about it. So they've got a lot of background knowledge when they come, and then they know the rules before they come. And maybe the parents sign off so they know, there's a lot of things that we can put in place. But I just wanted to know if we're open, receptive to the idea of children,
Yes,
school
we
groups
are.
coming.
The difference between a gallery and a museum is education, right? And so we need to invite the schools. We want them to bring the children in. We just need to have all the precautions in place, and the teachers need to have enough other chaperones along.
There's a lot of teaching that needs to happen before they come.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, totally.
Now, remember that when someone asks you, is this for sale? Some of it is, some of it isn't. I know there's a dot on that one right there. That's the one example we started with. See the dot right ahead of the word mask? If it's got a dot there, you will know it is not for sale.
It's not.
It is not for sale. Now, nothing will be removed from the exhibit ever until the exhibit goes down. So if somebody buys one, it stays. If they ask you the valuation, you can say it's between 40 and 290,000. In that gallery, it's between 7 and 22,000. And would you like to learn something about a particular piece?
Well, there's a list at the desk with the prices.
Yeah, but we're not giving them the notebook.
No,
you're-
somebody would just look, would ask. but-
Yeah, and you can look it up and give them the answer, but then get the person to Hella or to one of us to handle it. Otherwise, it becomes your responsibility. And I don't think you took on the responsibility of selling art. I don't think that's what you came for.
Not this week.
No.
Not this week.
Well, Sally, that's good.
And the
Well,
book
we're
sales will be
selling
handled by the
things.
front, by the reception people?
The book sales will be
Sally,
handled at the
Sally.
desk.
Sally.
We'll know that we have a lot of exciting exhibits planned. The next is Spineless, the photography exhibit. Then we have Michael Daly, who's deceased painter from the University of Washington, from the Northwest School. Large, beautiful, passive, dreamy landscapes. And then after that, Morse Clary's wood carving, books, and other events that tie into that, which will be this time next year. Well, actually, we'll open in January of next year. So there's something new and different every 3 months. And I'm sure by the end of 3 months, you're going to be actually tired of this. It's exciting now because it's new, but in 3 months, you'll be tired and you'll be glad to have a couple weeks off while we repaint and reinstall, and then you'll be geared up for the next exciting show.
Last question, on the drum over here behind us, are the handles, if you will, I don't know if that's what they are on either end.
They
Were
look
those
like handles.
attached at a later date?
They look like they're attached, yeah. If you look, there's a little seam there.
Yeah, they definitely are. Yep, they're attached. But this, like this opening, that would be something that would be cut with the scissors. You just poke it in and it's amazing the way this glass works. It's
And
just-
then the paddles probably made the flat ends? The pizza turners?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. How do you think they did that? The ends.
They well could have used paddles. I was going to ask on the pieces, we maybe don't have an example here. John Orbeck also painted on some of Morris's pieces. Do we have any examples of that?
Not that I'm aware of.
All right.
No.
This would have just been picked up, the design on it.
See, I would have thought, I asked somebody about surface painting.
Right.
I might have asked RaVae, so he might have just addressed it for the North Gallery. But he said no surface painting.
Okay, so I read an earlier book about Morris.
See, that could
had
be in
to-
this room, and I maybe asked Raven, and it isn't qualified for everything. Thank you for your attention this morning. Jack?
Thank you.